and I had already come to terms with, where I stood recently retired from my teaching career, living in a quiet house, nestled on the outskirts of town and filling my days with gardening and books. My husband had passed away years ago, and since then I'd found comfort in a simple routine, but nothing could have prepared me for the changes that came when my stepson Alex came to live with me. Alex was fresh out of college with dreams of starting his career as was a graphic designer in the city his father and I had married just years before his passing, and though Alex and I didn't get many chances to bond back then, we had always been cordial. When Alex called me a few months ago, I hadn't heard from him in a while. "Hey Mara," he said, his voice a bit hesitant. "I know this is kind of sudden, but I need to ask for a favor." I could hear the concern in his voice, and before he even finished, I knew what he was going to ask. He was in between jobs, trying to get his footing in a competitive field, and was struggling with rent. I told him he could stay with me for as long as he needed, until he found a stable job and a place of his own. I remember the day he arrived. I had spent the morning cleaning up the guest room, making sure everything was just right. As the hours passed, I found myself getting anxious, something I hadn't felt in years. What would it be like having someone so young living under my roof again? It had been so long since I'd shared my space with anyone, let alone a man his age. When he finally pulled up in his old beat-up car, I stepped outside to greet him. He smiled at me with that same familiar grin I remembered from family gatherings, but something was different now. He wasn't the awkward teenager I had known. Alec had grown into a tall, broad-shouldered young man with a confident air about him. "Hey Mara," he said, pulling me into a quick hug. "Welcome," I replied, feeling a bit out of place. "I hope the drive wasn't too bad." "Nah, it was fine, thanks for letting me stay here." The first few days were uneventful. Alex spent most of his time in his room or out looking for jobs. I did my best to stay out of his way, not wanting to be the overbearing stepmother, but there was something different about the house with him in it. I noticed small things like the way he would smile at me from across the table, or how he would linger in the kitchen just a little longer than necessary, chatting with me about his day. It was nice to have someone around. I couldn't deny that one night a few weeks after he moved in, something unexpected happened. I had gone to bed early, the house quiet as usual. It was probably around midnight when I heard the soft creak of my bedroom door opening. I turned over, barely awake, and saw Alec standing in the doorway. "Alex," I mumbled, confused. "Is everything all right?" He stepped into the room, his figure silhouetted against the dim light coming from the hallway. His face was hard to read in the shadows, but I could tell something was on his mind. I couldn't sleep," he said quietly, walking toward my bed. I sat up, rubbing my eyes. "Is something wrong?" He hesitated, then sat down on the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped slightly under his weight. "I don't know," he finally said. "I guess I've just been feeling a little." And I had already come to terms with voice, where I stood, tugged at my heart. I had always teaching career, living in a quiet house, assured, nestled on young the outskirts man, but in that moment he seemed filling so my days vulnerable with without books. Thinking. My husband had passed away years ago, my hand on and his since arm, then I'd found comfort what in little comfort I simple could. Routine. "You're but going to be all right," I said. Prepared me softly for the changes that it's just came. A rough patch. When my stepson Alex came through to live at with. Some point, me, Alex was fresh out of college. Then his eyes searching dreams mine of starting his career. As moment was the air between us graphic designer in the city. I don't know how else. And I had married just years I should have pulled away. His passing, should have said and though Alex to break and I didn't tension, but many instead I stayed to bond still back. Then we hand lingering had always on his been cordial. When Mara, Alex called me a few months ago, above a whisper, I nodded, unsure of while what. "Hey Mara," he said, his voice he stood up slowly, hesitant. His eyes, "I know this lingering is on me sudden, for just a second, but I need to ask for a favor." Before turning and heading back to hear the concern room in his as voice the door clicked shut behind him. He even finished. I lay back down, my heart racing, going to ask. Chest
He was
I
in
didn't know
between
what
jobs
to make of
trying
the
to get his
moment we had just
footing
shared
in a
was
competitive
just
field
and was
imagination
struggling
or
with
had
rent.
something
I told
really
him he could
changed between
stay with me for
us
as
the next
long
morning.
as he needed,
Everything was
until
back
he found
to
a
normal.
stable
Alex
job and a
acted
place
as if nothing
of his
had
own. I remember
happened
the
chatting
day
with
he
me
arrived.
over breakfast
I had spent the
about
morning
his job
cleaning up
hunt
the
and weekend
guest room,
plans,
making
but
sure
I couldn't
everything
shake
was
the feeling that
just right.
something
as the
had
hours
shifted.
passed,
I tried to
found
push it
myself
out of
getting
my mind,
anxious,
telling
something
myself
I
that I
hadn't felt in years.
overthinking
What would it
that
be?
I was just
like
lonely
having someone
and
so young
misreading
living
the
under my
situation,
roof
but
again.
as
As
the
the
days
days
went
went
on,
on,
I
long
couldn't
since
deny
I'd
that
shared
there was
my
something
space with
there
anyone,
it was
let
in the way
alone
his
a
hand
man
would
his age, when
brush
he
against mine
finally
when we
pulled up
passed
in his
the
old beat-up
hallway. The
car.
way he would
I
look
stepped
at me
outside
when
to greet him.
he thought I
smiled
wasn't paying
at
attention
me with that same
was subtle
familiar
but
grin.
undeniable,
remembered
and
from
I found
family
myself
gatherings,
wondering.
something was
this
different now.
Led we sat
wasn't.
there for a long
The awkward
moment.
teenager
The
I
weight
had
of
known
what
Alex
had just happened
had grown into
settling
a
in the
tall,
room was
broad-shouldered
quiet, except
young man with
for
a
the faint
confident
hum
air
of the
about
TV.
him. But inside,
"Hey Mara," he said.
my mind
said,
was
pulling me
racing.
into
I had just crossed
quick hug.
a
Welcome, I
line
replied,
I never
feeling
thought
a
I'd even
bit
approach.
out of place.
But
I
there
hope
was
the
no
drive
going
wasn't
back now.
too
Alex
bad. Nah,
was
it was fine.
still
Thanks
holding
for
me, his hand
letting me
resting
stay
gently
on my
Here the
waist,
first
and I
few
found
days
myself
were uneventful.
leaning
Alex
into
spent
him,
most of
feeling
his
a
time in his
strange
room,
sense
or out
comfort
looking
and
for
guilt
jobs.
all
I
at
did my best
once.
to
What now?
stay
I finally
out of his
whispered
way,
more
not wanting
to
be
myself than
the
to him.
overbearing
He didn't
stepmother,
answer,
but there was
right away. Instead,
something
he
different
shifted
about
slightly.
the house. With
Turning to
him
face
in
me
it, I
fully,
noticed
his
small
eyes held
things
a
like
the way he
seriousness
would
that
smile
made
at
my
me
heart
from
race.
across
The
take it
table,
one
or
step
how
at
he
a
would
time,
linger
he said.
in the
Quietly,
kitchen.
I
just
don't
a
want
little
to rush
longer than
anything
necessary.
just
Chatting
care
with me
about
about
Mara
his
more
day.
than I.
It was nice
Probably
to have someone around.
should the honesty in
couldn't
his voice
deny
hit
that
me.
one night a
Hard
few
it was
weeks
surreal
after he
hearing this
moved
from
in something
someone so
unexpected.
much younger.
Happened
from
I
someone
had
who
gone to bed
was
early.
supposed
The
to be
house
a part
quiet
of my
as
past,
usual.
not
It was probably
my future, but
around
was
midnight
this
when I heard
undeniable
the
connection
creak of
that
my
we both
bedroom
felt,
door opening.
but had
I
no idea
turned
how
over,
to
barely
navigate.
awake,
I
and
care
saw
about
Alex
you too.
standing
I admitted.
in the
My
doorway.
voice
Alex,
trembling
I mumbled
slightly,
confused.
but this is complicated.
Everything
Alex,
all right?
so
He stepped into
so much more complicated.
His figure
than either
silhouetted
of
against
us
the
might
dim
realize.
light
I
coming
know,
from
he
the
said
hallway.
softly.
His
I get that.
face was
but
hard
we don't
to
have
read
to
in the
figure
shadows,
everything.
I could
out
tell
right
something
now
was
just
on
we
his
can
mind.
just take.
It's
I
slow.
couldn't
I
sleep,
nodded,
he
trying
said
to
quietly,
process
walking
everything.
toward
My
my
rational
bed.
mind
I sat
was
up, rubbing my
screaming
eyes.
at me to
Is
stop,
something
to push
wrong?
him away,
He hesitated,
and
then
set
sat
boundaries
down
on
on
the
the
edge
part
of the
of
bed. The mattress,
me, the part that
dipped
had been
slightly
buried
under
his weight.
Years of
I don't know.
loneliness
He
and
finally
grief
said,
was
I guess,
telling me
I've just
something
been feeling
different.
a
It
little,
was
telling me that maybe, just maybe, I deserved to feel something again, even if it was unconventional, even if it was messy. For the next few days things were different. We didn't talk about the kiss, but the energy between us had shifted. There was a quiet understanding, an unspoken agreement that something had begun, and we were both tiptoeing around it, not wanting to break the fragile balance we had created. One evening a week later, Alec came home from a job interview, a grin on his face. I think it went well, he said, dropping his bag by the door. They seemed interested. I'll know by the end of the week. That's great, I replied, genuinely happy for him. We spent the evening in the living room, talking, laughing, falling into an easy rhythm that felt more natural than I had expected. As the night wore on, I found myself watching him more closely, noticing little things: his laugh, the way he absent-mindedly ruffled his hair, the warmth in his eyes when he looked at me. It was strange feeling this pull toward him, but at the same time it felt right. Later, as I was heading upstairs to bed, Alex called after me. Marla. I stopped on the stairs, turning to look at him. He was standing at the base of the steps, his hands in his pockets, an uncertain look on his face. Yeah, I asked, my heart pounding. I wanted to say thank you for everything, he said, his voice soft. You've been there for me in ways I didn't expect, and I don't want to mess things up between us. I smiled gently, though there was a knot tightening in my chest. You're not messing anything up, Alex. We're both just figuring things out. He nodded, his eyes searching mine. Good night, Mara. Good night, Alex. As I lay in bed that night, staring up at the ceiling, I couldn't help but think about how much had changed in such a short time. The house felt different with him in it, more alive, more complicated, but also more fulfilling. Weeks passed, and we continued
to dance around this delicate balance. There were moments when the tension between us would rise, when our hands would brush, or we'd sit a little too close on the couch, but we never talked about it. We both knew something had shifted, but neither of us was quite ready to take that next step. One night after Alex had officially landed his job, we decided to celebrate. We ordered takeout, opened a bottle of wine, and spent the evening talking about his future, his plans, and his excitement for what was to come. But as the night wore on and the wine loosened our inhibitions, the conversation drifted to that night in the kitchen, to the "'cause I haven't been able to stop thinking about it," Alex admitted, his voice low, his eyes locked on mine. "About you." I swallowed hard, the knot in my chest tightening. "Neither have I," whispered. He reached out, then taking my hand in his thumb brushing softly against my skin. "I know this is complicated," he said quietly, "but I don't care. I just want to be with you." My heart was racing, my mind screaming at me to stop, to think about the consequences, but in that moment all I could think about was him, about the way he made me feel alive again, about the connection we had that seemed to defy reason. "I want that too," I finally admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. And with that, the last of my resistance crumbled. We leaned into each other, our lips meeting in a kiss that was filled with all the longing, all the desire we had been holding back for so long. This time there was no hesitation, no pulling away. That night everything changed between us. We crossed a line that we both knew we couldn't uncross, but neither of us wanted to. It was messy, complicated, and completely unexpected, but it was also real, and in that moment that was all that mattered. As we lay together, the weight of the world momentarily lifted. I realized that life doesn't always follow rules. Sometimes it throws you into situations you never imagined, with people you never expected, and sometimes you just have to let yourself feel, even if it's complicated, even if it's not what you thought your life would look like, because in the end life is short, and maybe, just maybe, happiness doesn't always come in the way you think it will.